Greetings and welcome. We are in Senior English A, and our objective now for the hour is to cover a series of Renaissance, post-Renaissance, early Enlightenment poems. And we're going to begin on page 513 with John Donne's Holy Sonnet 10. Now, I'm not going to be able to give the amount of time, energy to these poems that I wish I could, but I'll say enough that you can go back in your own private study and at least Google some of this intel and begin to prep for the examination. Notice sonnet, 14-line poem with a certain kind of rhyme scheme and, of course, a certain kind of understanding usually of the iambic pentameter. But we'll forego all of that and simply point out that Holy Sonnet 10 is one of the most favorite read poems at funerals after he publishes it. Okay? Now, Donne is a profoundly religious thinker. And he has a certain expectation of what happens after you die. He will write a little poem to death where ostensibly he sticks his tongue out at death and says, "Na na 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 na, you can't hurt me." Death. It only makes sense then that this poem would be read at funerals. Take a look at what he says. Death, famous opening line of this sonnet, I'm on 513. Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. So right away, put it in your notes. Donne will say to death, you can't scare me. There isn't anything about death that I'm frightened of. Keep going. For those whom thou thinkest thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. Go back to my whiteboard. That's why I use the schemata. Even though I won't write it at all. If I point to this region of the board, and you were here yesterday and not on too serious a level of narcotic use, you will be able to recall that I put two boxes on my whiteboard. Do you recall? And I made the observation that metaphysical poets are far more interested in the second box than the first box. Remember, in the first box we will put a beautiful body. In the second box we will put the concept of beauty. Follow that line of thinking and now just simply put the human body in the first box. In the second box, remember, we're going to put the word spirit, mind, or soul. Now let's say for Donne and the metaphysics, it's as simple as this. You can, across the first box, write the big word capital D, death. And you would be absolutely right. As much as we love and have referenced Ruthie's tree throughout the course of our time together, it is a sad truth, an absolute truth, that that tree someday will not exist. That is the essence of existence in the first box. However, metaphysicians argue that is not true of the second box. Beauty never dies. Okay? Spirit, soul never dies. So in other words, what John Donne will say is, death, of course you jack everything in the first box, but you can't touch the second box. In other words, if you genuinely believe that you are of two parts, a body and a soul, death only gets the body, it does not touch the soul, and to that degree, as he says in the fourth line, death, actually, you don't get anyone at all. Notice he calls it poor death. He's making a joke. Oh, I feel so sorry for death. Keep going. Die not, poor death, and yet thou canst not kill me. Nor canst thou kill me. Line 5. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure. It's fun to lay down and take a nap. That's exactly what you do when you die. Then from thee much more must flow, and soon our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and souls delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell. And poppy or charms, dope, drugs, can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke. Why swellest thou then? In other words, why are you so proud, proud death? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. It's an interesting argument. Death only is a source of fear if all you believe in is the first box. But if you are at all capable of believing in the second box, well, death can't touch any of those things. And it's an interesting question then, in the two-box theory, where do you even put death? Well, death is a concept, granted, but only a concept of the first box. You can't touch the second box. To that degree, there is some hope for a number of readers of Donne's day, and of course many more to follow, that there's nothing to be afraid of and sad then in regards to death. That in fact, remember what Yeats says in Sailing to Byzantium. I'm making a 3A observation. That the soul within the decaying body actually begins to clap its hands and sing, and louder sing, every time the body gets older. So as you age, the soul starts to say, yay, I get to leave. Why? The body ages, but the soul doesn't. It doesn't get old. It stays young, and because the soul stays young, it always wants to get out of an older ancient body. Meditation 17. Again, I'm on 514. Again, I wish I could spend an entire hour with this, and I could if I would. Whole books have been written on this passage. It is a very famous passage, first to English readers, and then, of course, to all humanity. Donne makes an interesting observation, and it's built on that famous scene from Monty Python's Holy Grail, Bring Out Your Dead, Bring Out Your Dead, for those of you that know that scene. In pre-Renaissance England, when they had those terrible plagues and everybody started dying, they would bring a cart down the road, and you literally brought out your dead and just put them on the cart, and the cart would then take all those corpses to a place where they would then be mass buried. In the front of the cart, there would be a bell that was required to be rung all the time so that people would know to stay away from the cart. But of course, over time, when you heard the bell ringing, the bell tolling means ringing, you would immediately know somebody has died. Got me? And in fact, of course, church bells and cathedral bells were used often for the same reason. When the bell would toll, you knew someone had died. The passage will begin, and I won't read the whole thing, but the passage will begin with the observation that today I heard the bell ring. Somebody died. And my immediate thoughts were, well, it was somebody who I don't know, most likely, and to that degree, why should I care? That's the question you want to write down in your notes about Meditation 17. Somebody I don't know dies. Why should I care? Happens to everyone sooner or later. Big deal. What Donne's going to do, though, is make an interesting observation. He's going to use a word picture. England is an island. Island. When the waves hit the island during a storm, a small part of the shoreline breaks away. And when that shoreline breaks away, England is less land. There's less land of England, right? In the same way, he argues, every time an individual human being dies or departs, somehow that affects all of us, all of humanity. The final lines is where we will go. No man is an island. Line 20. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man, every human, is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind. Therefore, never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Now, of course, the great American author Hemingway, I'm making a 3A observation, will write a famous novel called For Whom the Bell Tolls, and he'll borrow that line from this poem, Poetic Offering, poetic prose poem. Donne here is making the argument that all humans are in some way interconnected. Okay? Let's move on now to the work of Ben Jonson. Very quickly, I'm on 518. This is an epitaph poem. That is to say, it's a poem mourning the loss of his boy. Jonson is deeply saddened by the death of his young boy. Okay? The speaker will mourn the death of his 7-year-old son. You want to write the number down in case it ends up on the exam. He thinks it fortunate that the boy has escaped the hardships that older people face, and he wishes his son, he calls his boy his best piece of poetry. Write that down, that's important. He calls his son his best poem. He wishes his boy a peaceful rest. And then finally, Johnson concludes that he must keep himself from loving too much again, because losing a loved one is so painful. You'll remember Tennyson's great little line, "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." And yet Johnson will point out, I'm not altogether sure I ever want to love this way again, because it causes such great pain when one loses what one loves. A Song to Celia, let's go to that one on 520. Again, I'm just giving you summaries here to expedite. This is a lyric poem in which the speaker expresses love for Celia and urges her to love him. When she sends back his gift of roses, he claims they have taken on her fragrance. This is the old "you're telling me I've got a chance" poem. For those of you who know Dumb and Dumber. In other words, he says, I want Celia bad. He sends her roses. She sends the roses back. In the poem, he makes the observation, the roses smell like my girl, who really isn't my girl, my would-be girlfriend, maybe was the way we would say it. And about that, we will say nothing more. Let's now move on to page 524, 525, 526, 527. These poems are offered in your anthology collectively. The place for us to begin is to make the observation that the notion of a guy going out on his own and finding a girl, convincing that said girl that she should be with him in any number of ways, either from a physical attachment to some kind of long-term matrimony. I say it again, that idea of a guy going out on his own and finding the girl is a relatively new idea in 1600. Think about how you already know this. Romeo and Juliet is a play you studied some brief 4 years ago. You were too stupid to appreciate it, obviously, because you were a freshman. But think about what, for example, Shakespeare is demonstrating in that classic tragedy. At the beginning of the play, Juliet is being offered in some kind of bargain by Paris, who, are you ready for this, has never seen Juliet. He doesn't even know what she looks like. He couldn't pick her out of a lineup. Are you ready for this? He does not care what Juliet looks like. He isn't interested in Juliet. He's interested in marriage. See, and in your mind, you think of those two things as similar. I ain't gonna marry somebody I've never met or somebody that I don't think is physically attractive. In Renaissance England, marriage is all about money. It's got nothing to do with affection and love, which is why Paris says to Juliet's daddy, how about it? Let's do this thing. Daddy's response is, she's only 13. Mama, a few minutes later, will say on stage, 13? I was already 13 and had a kid by 13. In other words, what's the deal? Let's hurry and get her married off. Mama's part of it as well. Ironically, it's Juliet's dad who says, whoa, whoa, whoa. Take your time, get to know my daughter, and then I'm sure you'll be able to marry her. Juliet later that evening is alone on the dance floor. In walks the young Romeo, who, by the way, already was talking about another girl, Rosaline, who he was so in love with he's ready to kill himself. And now all of a sudden he sees Juliet and he goes, whoa, she is H-O-T, hot. Now all of a sudden I'm ready for Juliet, forget about Rosaline. A few hours later, with the help of Friar Lawrence, these two kiddos, and that's what they are, will A, marry, B, sleep without Juliet's father's knowing about it together, which consummates now that marriage in every way. But by the end of the play, all hell's broken loose. Everybody's dead, including the two kids. What message is Shakespeare sending in this play? It's an easy one. Parents, look after your kids, and you determine who they're going to love. It is not their kids, it's not the kids' job to figure it out. Why? Well, look at the play. Obviously, they chose poorly. Now, a modern reading of this play is a totally different reading of the play. It's so heroic. Romeo and Juliet seeing each other on the dance floor and falling in love is the subject of every 8th grader's dream, right? I mean, sorry, Mr. Fromm, but 8th grader's dream. And of course, that's just the way that it is. That's a relatively new idea. Notice what happens in Romeo and Juliet. When Romeo sees Juliet, he walks up to her, and the first thing he does is start talking. He uses language to try to convince her that she should come with him. She should be with him. that he's impressed with her. Immediately, we realize for Juliet, it works. The language game works. Now, there is an argument to be made that Shakespeare's sending a little subtle message to girls that says, guys are really good talkers to get what they want. Notice how Shakespeare plays this game in Hamlet as well. Laertes will tell his sister Ophelia, what do you think? What's going on with Hamlet? Well, she says, he's a really nice guy and he's like talked to me on the phone and he writes nice poems. Laertes and Polonius will both say the same thing. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You can't be so stupid is the thing, that the guy is actually telling you the truth. He's only trying springes to catch woodchucks is the way that Polonius says it. It's a trap. Anytime a guy opens his mouth, well, remember what Hamlet says to Ophelia? Believe none of us. We are errant knaves all. All guys are liars. They will say what they need to say to get what they want. And Laertes and Polonius both say to Ophelia, you can't be that stupid. You have to understand that. Stop pretending like you're somehow some 9th grade girl. That is to say, pay attention to what these guys are saying and you'll understand it all in toto. Now, the two poems that best represent a guy trying to talk a girl into doing something she clearly doesn't want to do are provided for you in this anthology. I've had a number of seniors that point out these are dangerous poems and they probably shouldn't be in a high school anthology. But with that in mind, we'll go ahead and look at them nonetheless. Andrew Melville's To His Coy Mistress and To the Virgins to Make Much of Time. Now, I'm gonna work in reverse order because To the Virgins to Make Much of Time is the cliff notes for the Andrew Melville poem, if you get me. The Melville poem is long. Right, the Robert Herrick poem is very short, so that's where we're going to start. But I want to point out how your textbook company struggles with these two poems. I'll tell you out loud, these two poems are poems where a guy is speaking to a girl, saying to the girl, don't be coy. Coy means what? Coy means, I don't know if I really want, bashful, shy. I don't know if I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I should answer your text, sir. That's coy. You got me? So in other words, both of these poems are about a guy trying to convince the girl to hook up. Notice what your textbook company, though, will do in regards to the theme on page 523. They can't say these are two poems about a guy trying to get the girl to hook up with him. So what they do instead is to write a little introduction at the top of 523 where they say, these are poems about the great Horace line, Carpe Diem, seize the day. In other words, this is all philosophy, you see. This has got nothing to do with sex. Well, hello, look at the title. When I read the title off in the Master Schedule Review, and all I said was, page 526, Virgins, remember? Several of you just smiled like, dude, we're going to read a poem about virgins? What's up with that? But wait a minute, look at the full title. To the Virgins to Make Much of Time. Now, what exactly would that be about? Well, let's just point out the obvious. It gets dark at night. Notice the S at the end of the word virgin. We are not talking about a single girl. This is an admonition to all girls. What defines a virgin? We'll not get into it. We'll let Miss Barnes discuss it later. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Old time is still a-flying. And this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. Now, of course, if you are a not very subtle person, you will maybe think that he's talking about flowers and going out into the garden to gather flowers. When is the best time to gather a flower? The best time to cut a flower is when it is in full bloom, not when it's some shriveled up, dying old nasty rose sitting on a vine dead. In other words, let's get this project going now, i.e. Carpe Diem. Okay, so there's your Horace and philosophy line. The glorious lamp of heaven, the sun, the higher he's a-getting, the sooner will his race be run and nearer he's to setting. Now we move from flowers to talking about a day. If you think about your life as a single day, the best time of the day to play is when the sun is up, not when the sun has set. Because, of course, if you're thinking about your life as a day, when the sun is set is when you're going to die. The third stanza. That age is best which is the first. And again, I've had any number of seniors that say, this is the kind of crap senior boys try and feed freshman girls, and it works every year, tragically so. I've had senior girls that say, yeah, I remember when I was a freshman. That age is best, which is the first, when youth and blood are warmer, but being spent the worse and worse, times will succeed the former. In other words, come on, we got to do this now. We can't wait until you get old and but ugly. This is the time for us to work. Then, be not coy. There's that word. It's the same word Melville will use in the title of his poem. But use your time, and while ye may, go merry, for having lost but once your prime, you may forever tarry. In other words, you're going to have to lose your virginity sooner or later. Let's do it now, and let's do it with me. So in other words, this is a poem directly spoken to try to convince. Of course, we look at it and we go, how could any girl be stupid enough to buy, oh yeah. So I didn't say anything. We're all seniors, and so we're familiar with those poor little freshmen, aren't we? Yeah, but he really loves me. He does. Really? Yeah. To his coy mistress, the same game is played. The poem is going to be a little bit longer rendition of the same project. I wish I had time to tell you in 10,000 years how beautiful you are, how much I love you. Now, therefore, page 525, while the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, and while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires, now let us sport us while we may. I'll let you imagine what the word sport means. And now, like amorous birds of prey, rather at once our time devour than languish in his slow-chapped power. Let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball, and tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. Thus, though we cannot make our son stand still, yet we will make him run. You can look at all the verbs of this poem and see some pretty powerful sexual language there, not to be missed. Finally, in the poem To Alethea from Prison, we're playing the same game all over again. Carpe diem. Thank you and good day.